Today, Royal Caribbean is a monster cruise line, and I've sailed it time and time again. In fact, it's at the top of my favorites, but I'll be honest, there was a learning curve with everything from how things work on board, to CocoCay, to pricing, and more. So, what do I wish that I knew before sailing that would help you have a better trip? I'll tell you right now. The first thing you want to know about Royal Caribbean is something that I actually think is a pain in the butt for planning. Royal Caribbean, they use something that's called dynamic pricing. Now, that's just a fancy way of saying that prices for many things change depending on your specific cruise. Take the drink package, for example. The price you pay will vary depending on your specific trip. So I can't tell you the cost, and you won't know the exact price until you actually book your cruise. It's the same thing for things like the beach club or the water park on CocoCay. Maybe you get lucky and it's priced lower than usual, or it may be that your trip sees higher prices. That uncertainty is something that you frankly just have to deal with. My first cruise on Royal was aboard Mariner of the Seas, built in 2003. My second was aboard Enchantment of the Seas, built in 1997. Even between those two ships, built only 6 years apart, there was a major difference in what it was like to sail. Now, the difference between newest and oldest is even harder to imagine. Royal Caribbean is known for having the largest cruise ships in the world, with the most things to see, to do, and to eat. But those older ships, they frankly just don't hold a candle to what's on the newest ones today. If you're thinking of sailing Royal Caribbean for the first time, I think that you're best off focusing on something built in the past 10 years to get an idea of what the cruise line is really all about. Otherwise, the experience will be much, much different. If you're traveling with a family, then one thing you want to know before booking is that I consider Royal hands down the best cruise line for those traveling with older kids or teenagers. Now, when I first started sailing the line, I didn't have a kid. Now I'm happy that I know just how good Royal Caribbean is for teens. What makes it so great for older kids is that it offers so much more for them to do. There's the kids area and the teen hangouts, but Royal is also famous for things like bumper cars, their arcades, rock climbing walls, the flow rider, and the water slides. Some ships have escape rooms, and even the entertainment on board is often geared toward family shows versus high-end or avant-garde performances that might lose the interest of younger viewers. The first time I visited CocoCay, well, it was well before the transition to what it is today. Back then it was just sleepy and quiet. Today, it's essentially a theme park. There's a lot to do on CocoCay, and Royal Caribbean continues to add new things for a fee. Today, the water park is a charge. The Coco Beach Club is a charge. Cabanas and day beds around the island are a charge. And the new adults-only Hideaway Beach is also a paid entry. In other words, you can spend plenty of money if you wanted to. But what you'll want to know is that you don't have to spend money to have a great time here. The island, it's pretty large, and there's a massive pool and tons of beach space. So if you go on a cruise and want pool time or beach time, and who doesn't, then you absolutely can have an awesome beach day without spending a dime. If you've never sailed any cruise before, then you might have an idea of the entertainment on board as being hokey shows with lip syncing and frankly washed up performers. That's not really accurate for any major cruise line, but even less so with Royal Caribbean. I didn't realize just how good the shows on board are when I first started sailing. There's a ton of talent, but also a lot of technology, especially on the newer ships, that takes performances to another level. Then, the Oasis and the Icon class ships have aqua theaters with water performances that are unlike anything that you've seen. I will say that the ice shows on the ships with the skating rink, they have not been my favorites, but if there are shows in the theater or the aqua theater, I know to consider them a can't miss. One thing I wish I knew before sailing Royal Caribbean is that if you want the most when it comes to food, then you have to be prepared to shell out more money. Food included with your fare is the Windjammer Buffet and the main dining room. Then, there are a number of other included spots, but they're generally just snacky areas like the grab and go pizza or a spot to grab tacos, or get a muffin in the morning. Anything that's an actual sit-down service, it's going to be an extra charge, unfortunately. Now, I don't like having to spend extra on specialty restaurants, but I generally do make it a rule to work in 2 4-pay meals during a 7-day cruise. Otherwise, the buffet and the dining room, they get a bit stale. I mentioned dynamic pricing earlier, but it's not just charging different prices for different cruises. Royal Caribbean, they also charge different prices depending on if the ship is in port or at sea. For instance, when I sailed Quantum of the Seas to Alaska, the North Star that takes you up and over the ship was free when in port, but a charge if done while at sea. It's similar with the spa. You'll find cheaper prices when the ship is in port and most people are off the ship and out exploring. The prices are higher when you have days at sea and a more captive audience. So take advantage and you can save yourself a nice chunk of change. You wouldn't think that a cruise ship would be that hard to navigate. After all, you'd think that it would just be long hallways that go back and forth. Many cruise lines, however, they build ships that are anything but easy to get around. One nice thing to know about Royal is that there is a lot of thought put into navigating the huge ships. Not only are they laid out more simply with few dead ends and lots of hallways that do in fact span the length of the ship, but they like to put out maps to help you navigate and even put door markers that point the way forward. If you have a round door marker in your cabin, look for the arrow. If you have the older wave versions, the high end of the wave is the way to the front of the ship. Others simply have a little ship icon that points forward. Despite the massive size of Royal Caribbean's fleet, I've always found them easier to navigate compared to many other cruise lines. Speaking of those big ships, there are a lot of people that get turned off on the newer vessels due to the number of people that they carry. Having 6,000 other passengers on a cruise ship is not unusual. Of course, you might imagine a place where you can barely breathe that there are so many people. In reality, Royal Caribbean builds ships to accommodate that many people, not simply stuffing more passengers on board. I like to use something called the space ratio. I take the gross tonnage of the ship divided by the number of passengers at double occupancy. On this metric, Royal Caribbean ships consistently measure slightly more than 40, whether the ship was built a year ago or 20 years ago. In other words, yes, there are more passengers, but the size of the ships have also kept pace, meaning that there's still plenty of elbow room. One thing that should be plenty well known by now, but if you're a first-time cruiser, you definitely want to know, is that there are nice discounts for booking packages ahead of time. I've told you that prices are dynamic, meaning that they change depending on the cruise that you book. But it's always the case that Royal Caribbean offers discounts for early purchases on things like drink packages and the Wi-Fi packages. They do this because in the cruise industry, passengers that book early, they end up spending more overall on their vacation. So a discount is made up for in the long run. But if you're going to buy anyway, doing it early and saving some cash is smart. Now, one sale to watch for is around Black Friday, when they seem to offer the biggest discounts of up to 50% off in many cases. One thing I wish I knew really only applies to a small segment of passengers, but it's definitely been beneficial to me. If you like to sail solo, then you know that it can be an expensive way to cruise. Rooms are sold on double occupancy, so say a $400 cruise fare, it's actually $800 when you factor this in. Despite that, there is one perk for sailing solo on Royal. If you sail alone but pay for double occupancy, then Royal Caribbean awards you double Crown and Anchor points. So a 3-day solo cruise earns you as many points as a 6-day regular cruise with another person. Those that like to chase that loyalty status should know that this is an easy way to ramp it up quickly. One thing that I never thought about before sailing Royal Caribbean, but it jumped out at me immediately, is now a sneaky favorite feature of sailing the line. The cruise line does a great job of incorporating artwork into the ship. Now, any cruise line will hang pictures on the walls, but Royal really focuses on adding sculptures, pictures, and even large works of art around the entire ship. Now, why is that such a big deal? For one, some of the pieces are memorable and things that you'll see nowhere else. But it is also it adds to the atmosphere of the ship. It makes it feel more luxurious, more fun, and frankly, it's just interesting to see. Next time that you sail, really take a few minutes to appreciate the pieces around the ship. Now, discounts on packages before the cruise are something to take seriously as they can save you a lot of money. Hemming and hawing over waiting for a cruise sale? I say don't bother. This isn't just a Royal Caribbean specific thing, but it's definitely something that the cruise line is guilty of. Those sales that are offered, they run constantly. The baseline for Royal seems to be up to $650 off, with 30% off of all cruises with kids sailing free. So even if you see that countdown timer warning you the sale is about to end, it may be tweaked at the end of the countdown or often extended, but the price will most likely stay the same. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you learned a thing or two about sailing Royal Caribbean. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe. You can also find out more about sailing Royal Caribbean or any other cruise line on Cruzely.com. Until next time, happy sailing.